So hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name is Robbie Griswold. I use he and they pronouns. I am the RC Communications and Outreach Specialist now, and I'm an alum of the class of 2007 with the major in Arts and Ideas in the Humanities. And I have the wonderful pleasure of facilitating the RC Alumni-Student Mentorship Program, of which many of you are members. And today is our final meeting for that group, and we opened it up to the entire RC student body to join us for this panel. And the panel is sort of themed around this graphic, which I think you see on the shared screen, which Caitlin, one of our panelists today, brought to my attention, I think is great, which is how life often goes. What I planned is this very straight line, and then what actually happened is this much more artistic, curvy, fun ups and downs, curvaceous thing that curves and eventually makes its way toward the same direction as the original plan, but took many, many different routes. And so the event today really is about leveraging our academic, professional, and personal experiences, which in the RC can be quite all over the map, and leveraging them for the benefit of ourselves for getting jobs, for getting into programs that we want to get into, and really thinking about that as an asset that a student who might be in a much more traditional kind of straightforward path might not get as many of these well-rounded experiences. I also am hoping that the panel and the conversation today can touch on the role that mentorship, which of course this program uses and engages in, how mentorship can help overcome obstacles, things like competitive pandemic economy, the imposter syndrome a lot of us feel, writer's block, which I know many of us are writers in the room. And so obviously you all have probably discovered that you are muted, and please keep yourself muted unless you will be speaking. And for the first bit, we're just going to have the panelists and myself be on mic as we speak. Although alums in the room, I really encourage all of you and the students to use the chat function at any time. Alums in the room that are in the program, please, if you have alternative answers than the ones that you hear the panelists give, you can type those into the chat, because this can be a very juicy kind of plug-in time for everybody to hear lots of different responses to these questions. So please don't feel at all shy about that. Use the chat as you wish. Students, I encourage you to chat with the alums that are here. Also, alums that are here, if you know how to do this, if you can change your name and get on screen and even give like the year of your graduation, just to indicate to the students, like we can see a little bit better, if you can figure that out, how to change that, add that to your name. Okay, let's get started with the panelists. So we're gonna have everybody introduce themselves. And panelists, this can be pretty quick, you know, your name, your pronouns, your majors, if you're working now, what you're doing, and then maybe the best thing you've eaten in the last week. And so let's start with Lena.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I actually just graduated last semester, so December 2020. I majored in economics and minored in American culture with a focus in Asian Pacific Islander American studies. I currently am in Chicago. I go by she, her, hers. And right now I'm working for Goldman Sachs in finance. And the best thing that I ate, I was experimenting and made pineapple pork adobo. That was pretty good. So yeah, and then on that note, I'll hand it off to Mark.
Cool. Hello. Hey y'all, my name's Mark. I use he, him pronouns. I am a senior. I'm about to graduate in like 2 weeks. Kind of scary, kind of exciting. I'm majoring in organizational studies and program in the environment. And after I graduate, I'm going to be moving to Montana, to Bozeman, to work for Montana Conservation Corps, under a nonprofit called the Gallatin River Task Force in Big Sky. So yeah.
I know how to use Zoom. It's only been over a year of this. I'm sorry. I'm Caitlin Cowan. I am a 2008 graduate of the RC. I studied creative writing and English through the LSNA. I'm living in Muskegon, Michigan, the west side of Michigan right now. I currently work as the development coordinator, director of international programs, and chair of creative writing at Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, wearing a lot of hats there. The best thing that I've eaten, I made last night. I made coq au vin, a French chicken recipe. It was delicious.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ionut Gitan. It's nice to see everyone on this Sunday. I graduated from the RC in 2012. I majored in Asian languages and cultures, studying Japanese in the RC. I live in New York City right now, and I work in communications for a humanitarian aid nonprofit called Catholic Medical Mission Board. But before I got into the humanitarian aid world, I worked in fashion and PR between Japan and New York. And maybe not something I ate, but the best thing I've had this past week was I had a really nice Greek orange wine that I really enjoyed.
And hi, my name is Maria Cicero. I use she, her pronouns. I'm sorry if my Wi-Fi cuts out. I'm currently at my grandfather's house and his office does not get that great Wi-Fi, so I'm using a hotspot on my phone. But I am a senior, also like Mark, graduating in a couple weeks, which is crazy. I'm studying history and arts and ideas in humanities, and in August, I'm going to be moving to Chicago to work as a city year 4 member. And the best thing that I've had this week is probably, there's this market that's kind of, it's in Ipsy, but it's like border of Ann Arbor and Ipsy on Ellsworth. It's called Alez Market, and it has the best bakery. And so they have these like little spinach and cheese pies and stuff. It's so good. Amazing.
Awesome, making me hungry. Delaying my dinner a little longer. Thank you all for popping in. Did I get all the panelists there? Is that everybody? I think it is. Great, welcome. And for those of you who are not in the panel, but who have your cameras turned off, hopefully at some point in the day, you'll turn your camera on so we can just see you for even just a moment, just to say who we're saying hi to on this side of things. So at some point, I encourage everybody just to turn their camera on just for a second, if they're not already on. And again, I encourage everybody to use the chat function and to pop in responses to things that you're hearing from the panel. We will have a Q&A section that will open up to the whole floor here. And so please hold your questions till that period. And alums, please feel free to pop in, cabbage on or add other responses to the ones that you hear mentioned by the panel. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and dive in. And so the first set of questions is around this idea of mentorship, which for a lot of people can be a new thing that we are hoping to build more skill in the RC with this program. So how would you, first of all, define mentorship, and how might it be different from other kinds of professional or other kinds of relationships with a power dynamic that there often is in mentorship? What is mentorship exactly? And how has mentorship impacted your life? So let's start with that pair of questions. And this, Lena's here, and Lena's on cam now. And if somebody on the panel wants to start, please go ahead.
Sure. Now that I'm visible, I guess I can start. So yeah, what I would say, especially because, so I graduated in December and I've only been working since February. And, corporate America is new territory for me. And I feel like mentorship, especially this program, has been so helpful because there are little things that, I don't know who to talk to about, just in terms of like basic etiquette or in the workplace. And for me, at least, it's remote. So even navigating that is really tricky. And it's been really helpful to just talk to someone else and it just being like unfiltered and candid and really expressing whatever's going on and knowing that someone has gone through it or is going through it. So I think that mentorship is this really like fluid and open space where you can say or ask questions or bring up things that maybe you wouldn't want to bring up to someone at work or in your team or something like that. But it allows you to really kind of express yourself in an open way.
And adding off of that, I would probably say that like a mentor is someone who actively cares and like works toward like your success, which is nice. And it is also still like a transactional relationship where it's like you're getting something like a person to talk to, someone who has gone through what you're going through. But also in an ideal sort of pairing, the mentor will also get something from you, a new perspective or a new way of looking at things. And I like, for me personally, at least, mentorship was not something that I sought out like all that much until I was kind of like a late junior or senior year, basically. And that was partially because I was like embarrassed or afraid to like go talk to these people that I wanted to learn from, because oh my god, like what if they didn't like me, or like what if they say no. And looking back, that was like really kind of a mistake on my part, because it's definitely helped me figure out stuff that I want to do, and it's given me connections and people to rely on, as well as like, you know, introducing me to people who are really cool who I wouldn't have met and who have helped me like finish big projects, basically.
And alums on the panel, I mean, mentorship there's not an age where at which point you no longer need mentorship, right? Like it's a lifelong kind of thing. Have you experienced mentorship within your profession as a way to continue to grow professionally? And if you could speak to that, anyone on the panel or in the chat, alums out there listening?
I've experienced it a little bit. I think part of my, issue with having kind of a lack of mentorship during my more formative years, especially by women, which is something that I think I would have benefited from, is because I thought that it would sort of organically grow out of existing relationships, like with teachers, let's say. But teachers have a different role. They have another job to do, to deliver content to you, for example. And so there's sometimes room in the margins for mentorship to come out of that. But what was helpful for me when I got older, once I was teaching at the University of North Texas, for example, was just, kind of approaching a more established woman professor who I liked and knew, and just sort of putting it out there, like, can we just talk about life and things? And we didn't put the mentorship word on it, but, it was a relationship where we had nothing, there were no other goals other than holding each other up and, her passing on knowledge to me and trying to listen to where I was in my career. So I think part of the thing I learned was that it's okay to seek out your own mentors. There's not really just sitting around waiting for someone to notice you and say, I'm going to take you under my wing, will result in maybe not having very many mentors. So if you see someone and there's someone in your life when you say, I want to know what they know, how did you become who you are? You can ask them and they'll tell you.
Definitely, yeah. To go off of what Caitlin said, like I also didn't really seek out mentorship or even like have a concept of it like until probably like after I had graduated Michigan. And then yeah, it was only through my professional life that I realized that these bosses that I had were actually the ones mentoring me and like kind of like guiding me along my career path. And even, like I transitioned from working in one industry to another, from fashion to humanitarian relief and nonprofit world. And, through all like kind of the two big organizations that I worked for, like my bosses who have become my friends and mentors have like stayed with me even as I like leave those left those industries or like leave those companies. So it's like, developing these relationships like even as mentors, and like continuing to like contact them and like text them and things like that has been like really beneficial to me. So yeah, it's kind of like it can happen at any stage, I think, finding a mentor.
Yeah, so it sounds to me like it's a kind of relationship that wasn't really taught to us, that we had to eventually figure out, oh, there's this whole other tenor that we can have with somebody that we didn't know. And so what advice would you give to this listening audience for establishing that that initial relationship? Caitlin, you started touching on it, being pretty willing to just kind of directly ask for it, maybe not use the M word, but how to get it going good is a term we used to use at my last job at Zingerman's. Like get the relationship on a good flow. And so also the mentees in the room, I'm curious to know how that was for you to get to establish in this program. So we had this program where you kind of had it kind of given to you structurally, but you still had to come up with a way to open up and to develop a relationship with this complete stranger, right? So I'm curious for advice that you'd give this listening audience to establish a good relationship with this mentor, especially if you don't know them.
Sure. So I guess in general, like the first part of the question is like, how do you obtain a mentor or someone that you can talk to? I think that, I mean, it has to be the right chemistry, right? So I think that, you can't just go to anybody and just like expect that to be there. But I would really pay attention to if you do connect with someone really well, or if they're doing something that really interests you, or there's some sort of connection, like what you're studying is what they're doing, or anything like that. That's a really good start. Because bringing that up will like start a dialogue, and that's really all you have to go off of. I think my personality, I'm just more social. So I think for me, it's easy for me to kind of explain myself and be like, oh my gosh, I want to know everything about you. But I mean, if that's not your personality, I would just be true to yourself, because you want a mentor that also kind of plays off of your personality. And I think those types of pairings and that type of dynamic is really important. So I guess what I'm saying is just be yourself, which really sounds cheesy, but I think to have the best type of experience, it's important for you to stay true to who you are, because then your mentor can really kind of give you the best advice.
Yeah, very similar to what Lena said. I'm also a very social person, so I think that I've maybe been lucky and I've run into this issue a little bit less um, in terms of like being able to open up. But like I'm a big proponent of being vulnerable and like sharing the challenges that you're having and not being embarrassed by that, because that's how you get help. And I think that at least for the people around me, and especially at Michigan, at such a high achieving university, people are really reluctant to show when they're struggling. And when you're able to do that, then that's how you get tools and tips to actually help you. In addition to that, a really concrete thing that I know is more helpful to people who have like who have social anxiety and are more nervous about that kind of thing is literally just writing down 3 questions that you want to make sure you ask. I've done that before. And it's helpful because if nothing else, like I have like that and I can say, hey, like I was actually thinking about this ahead of time, whether it's like in an informational interview or a mentorship, like with a mentor that you already know. It always works to go into any conversation with a agenda.
Oh yeah, and definitely just going off of that, asking questions in general, like even if you don't want to talk about yourself like yet, I found that in general, people love to talk about themselves and they love to talk about cool things that they're doing, and they love it specifically like when you're really interested in them and what they're doing. It's very flattering. And so at least in my experience, if you are genuinely interested in another person and what they're doing, they will open up to you and like tell you things and like start this relationship really.
Yeah, I think expressing that curiosity is really key. And one thing that I've said before to, several different people that kind of doesn't work as well in pandemic times is, could I buy you a cup of coffee and pick your brain about X topic? I'm going on the job market. Could we sit and talk about that? And so you give them something, you offer something first. Let me create a little nice experience for us. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. But you can do this over Zoom too. Would you be willing, to ever let me pick your brain? And like Maria was saying, if you frame it in terms of getting them to talk about themselves, that's great. And folks really do like to do that. They sometimes appreciate the chance to recontextualize or talk about in a new way their own experience. And so you're giving that to them too as an entry point.
And then I guess I would just say, if you do end up doing that, reaching out and say they don't respond back to you, or the response isn't like what you expected. Like, just like, don't take that to heart. Like, just because someone's has this position, or in your mind they have this position that you want, or, you know, something, like maybe they're not actually the best teacher or the best mentor. You know, not all, you know, leaders or teachers, not all leaders or, you know, people, successful people can be a mentor. So I would just like keep that in mind too. And, you know, it's okay to cold call, then also not, you know, receive a response.
That happened to me so much. Sorry, Robbie, one second. That happened to me so much. Like when I was like looking for an advisor for my thesis, I emailed so many professors going like, "Hi, this is my project. Like, would you be willing to talk to me about it?" And I emailed probably like 8 people, and like 3 of them never got back to me. 3 of them told me no, like I'm too busy. 1 of them told me, don't do this project because this other person has already done everything that you're going to say about it. And I was like, oh no. But then on like my last person, I emailed him and I was like, can we talk please? Like I've just been having terrible luck and no one's really open to this. And he ended up being like the best advisor that I could have asked for. But if I hadn't gone through like those 7, I might not have like met him or like had him be my advisor, which really could have derailed the rest of the project.
And getting into some nuance here, like I remember I had a mentor once who only could see me at like 8 a.m. once every 2 months, and it was only for a half an hour. And it was like, that wasn't going to be a person who was going to help me like put my pieces together and like really help me like form myself, but it was a place where I could get something very specific from her that was really helpful to me at that time. So we have different needs at different times, right? So if you're really getting started in a new career area and you really need some more guidance, that's probably not the mentor for you, right? A person who can only meet you once every 3 months for a half an hour. So it's also really good to know kind of what you're looking for and know that, in a way, even though you're asking for somebody's help and you're going to gain something from them, they can still offer something that you don't need. And you can still say, that's not a good fit for me either. But kind of knowing that a little bit and just kind of doing your best to kind of get that information ahead of time so that you're not asking, you're not barking up the wrong tree kind of thing a little bit. Does anybody on the panel have any experiences like that where it was just like not the right fit at the right time, but maybe at another time in your development it might have been? This is a completely surprise question, by the way. I did not prep the panel on this one at all.
Yeah, I can share that. I was thinking about writing a thesis so I'm not writing a thesis, and part of the reason that happened was because I was thinking about doing one, and I was also going abroad, and the professor that I was emailing was just being really unresponsive, and she's a really, really, really cool professor, and I really like her, and we actually like interact regularly now. But at the time it was just too much, too fast, too soon, and I realized that separately I was also like not writing a thesis for the right reasons. I actually have something I want to do, I just want to do it, and I don't regret like deciding to not and like taking my foot off the gas on that. And more importantly, I realized that I could keep in touch with this professor without actually having to like have like a project that we were working on together. So like every once in a while we'll email. She's really, really cool. And it's been nice to have that and not have that external pressure.
Thanks, Mark. That's great. Okay. And thanks to everybody who's popping in. I see Lizzie has popped in here a couple times. Anna, thank you. Molly, a couple times. Yeah, so everybody keep your eyes on the chat. There's good stuff flowing in there too. Okay, so we're going to move into the section of this panel that's really about leveraging this liberal, there's my husband walking through the living room, leveraging this liberal arts experience that we collectively have had, very different paths, but we've all gone through at least one point of the guest house of the residential college. And what advice, panelists, would you give to other RCers on this call looking to leverage these really different, disparate academic, professional, personal experiences to best present themselves to land the job? That's a big question, but of course it's contextual. So I'd love to learn a little bit maybe about a couple panelists willing to kind of talk about how they packaged up their story in a way that helped them get through where they are now.
I have some advice that I kind of like just heard that I think is pretty valuable, which is basically like to find the value in your terms of like everything that you've done, and like make a list, write it down. So every activity that you did, everything that you experienced, what was the value of that, and how is that valuable or applicable to the job that you are applying for? So like, if you directed a play, if you're part of like the RC players and you directed a play, then you can ask yourself, what did I learn from that experience? And you can say like, I learned conflict resolution, I learned strong leadership skills, I learned event planning, basically. And then like early on in that interview process, like say how you can apply it to the job, and also figure out what sort of values they're looking for, like uncover the values that they want. So if they want like, and you can kind of do this before your interview, but if you think that they're looking for like a person who can diversify their perspective, or if they're looking for a problem solver or a team player, like have your list of like things and experiences that you've done or have happened to you, and like say like, this made me this, or like this gave me this skill, and then you can like plug that in basically, and bring it up early. And then also I would say that for me, in addition to doing that, being candid and vulnerable, kind of like Mark said earlier, was really helpful for me. Like in my city year interview, I was asked like about a time that I struggled, and like continued on, just because a lot of, just by virtue of like the population that I will be serving, like there's a lot of things that can go wrong and do go wrong, and a lot of struggle there. And so she really wanted me to speak candidly about something that I had been through, so that I could be empathetic, or so that I can like understand. And by talking about that pretty vulnerably, I think that was a huge like uptick or whatever in my interview. Like it was something that she liked.
Robbie, you had asked about how to sort of the idea of leveraging the kind of degree that you get in the RC. Yeah, I think one thing that the RC gives you is the ability to see how your different skills might translate in different areas. It gives you a sort of a good broad lens to see what you can do because of the educational environment that you're in. But I do think, and if you've been on any of these other events with me, maybe you've heard me say this, but I really do think there's a lot of value in thinking about not so much what kind of title you want on your business card, whether you want business cards, but to think about what kind of life you want to live and what that would look like and how work would fit into that. Because a title doesn't tell you anything about what your day-to-day life is. And if you for example, I really pursued to a very high level academic teaching in higher education. And, for reasons that had to do with my area of focus, my interest in English, the prestige of the institution. But, then getting into it and living that life of someone who's in higher ed, and realizing that there is sort of no firewall between your personal life and your work life, doing a lot of grading, sort of getting deeper into the lived experience of that job taught me some things that I didn't know and that I couldn't have known in some ways unless I'd really prepared myself to think about it in ways that I hadn't. So I think one great thing to do is to think about what you would actually physically like your life to look like. How much free time do you have? How much travel do you do for work? Some, none. What kind of hours do you work? Do you work a lot? Do you work little? How much interaction do you want to have with other people? Would you like to work alone? Just asking yourself some broader questions like that, I think can tell you a lot about the way forward and what that might be for you in a way that we're not really traditionally taught to think about.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything that you said, Caitlin. I think that's great. I would also say, like, in terms of leveraging your degree, and just being so lucky to be a part of the RC, I would say for me, I majored in econ and minored in Asian Pacific Islander studies. And I didn't necessarily major in an RC degree, but I fulfilled all the RC requirements. And I would say, while requirement filling can seem really annoying because you have to go find the right classes and whatever, it's actually great because I am so grateful that I have the language skills that I have. I actually pursued more than just one language. I pursued Thai, Chinese, and Tagalog at the university. And I really think I made the most of my experience. I also think the classes that the RC have are just so wonderful in terms of quality and content. I think it's great to have kind of a more intimate setting where the classes are capped and you get more face time and you actually get to know your peers, and it's not just like, oh, whatever, I'm not going to bother knowing anyone in my class. It's more meaningful relationships, and I think that's so important, especially when you're only in college for like 3-4 years, to make the most out of that. And I think that speaks a lot to employers too, to see that you come from such a diverse background and it adds so much more dimension to you as a person. I also think the RC is just a very safe, warm, and fuzzy environment. And I think that that type of compassion that I really feel from anyone in the RC really translates to the work environment. You want to be working with people that are nice and care about how you're doing. And I think that really comes through.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Ionut. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, just to echo how great the RC is. Yeah, I really couldn't, like, even like right out of college, I really wouldn't have been able to pursue like the dream that I wanted to like work in fashion, like live in Japan without the RC. Like, not only because I, learned so many Japanese language skills being in the intensive program at the RC, but because of LSNA in Michigan, I was able to, study abroad for a year with an exchange program at the University of Tokyo, which is like, for Japanese companies, they like know that university. It's a good university as like with Michigan. And while I was at studying abroad in Tokyo, I got to make a lot of friends that were in the fashion industry and like interned at a magazine in Japan. And then also in Japan, I was able to start a blog. So all these like small stepping stones actually were exactly the things that I was able to say in that job interview, my senior year of college. And without, these kind of like disparate pieces that, I hadn't planned that they were all going to be connected. Just after the fact, I ended up connecting them all together and like built that narrative of myself that I would be able to say very quickly during a job interview. That was really like beneficial to me, and I really wouldn't be able to do that without the community and the offerings from the RC in Michigan.
Yeah, that idea of building the narrative, I think, is so key. And it actually sounds a lot like the RC, right? There's a lot of writing in the RC. So there's a lot of writing that narrative, right? And so like Lena talking about like all the things that you saw from the small classes and like the closeness with your peers, and then finding a way to actually express that in some way. Like I'm curious, Lena, like how you actually demonstrated those values or those benefits in the application process, or was it more something that came up in an interview? As I'm hearing also Ionut sound like in a way maybe retrospectively you were able to like see that narrative more clearly than you even were conscious of at the time, often is the case, right? And so and then the questions like what Caitlin recommended with like what's this kind of life that you want to live, and then you can even connect that to what you've already started doing, and that actually might help you start making decisions in undergrad that'll help lead you toward a direction that's based on like what kind of a life do I want to live. But yeah, I just think that those are so key, that you take agency of tying all these pieces together yourself, as opposed to letting this job be the end all be all. It's just a stepping stone in a process of many for you. But Lena, I did want to pop it back to you. Were you ever actually specific about expressing those virtues of the RC to an employer, or was it more something that you saw was just helpful to you packaging yourself?
So a couple things I would say that, in the interview process. So since I graduated in December, the turnaround time's been kind of quick for me to get employed and be doing that. But I would say, as much as, I mean, to anyone that's listening on the panel that's applying to an internship or applying for a full-time job, whatever it is, I would say that as much as it is about the competency of you being able to do the job, they're also paying attention to whether or not they want to work with you in terms of your personality and how you interact with others. And I think what the RC really teaches is, because you're put in these very small, closed group environments and you're given so many opportunities to thrive and get to know different people that are in a creative kind of setting, I think that that is something so unique. And especially for me, in finance, you get people coming in, like so many econ majors, so many business school majors, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I just think having something extra to really show that you're more than just that, and you're creative, and you've experienced all these different things, or you've had these opportunities to really connect with people on a deeper level through like your classes, projects, performances, whatever it is. I think that that stands out. And that's something that I've kind of touched upon in interviews, because it's something that I think throws them off a little bit, because it's not the typical story. But I think it also makes them leave the interview being like, that one was interesting, or I'm going to remember that one. And it's a good follow up, and it's a good kind of like, oh, okay, tell me more. So I think that's kind of what I've taken away. And I think I really use that to leverage the types of jobs that I look for.
Any other thoughts on this topic before we move on to the next question? No? Okay. Let's open this up at this point to the audience, the student audience here. If you are interested in asking a question, would you just put the word stack into the chat, and then I can call on people in order that they appear in the chat, and then you can actually unmute yourself when it comes your time. I did want to put out there to all of the other alums that are in the room, I want you to type into the chat whenever you get a chance your response. Like how did you package your disparate experiences to an employer or to an admissions committee after the RC? I'm curious to hear more narrative responses to that out there. Okay, while we wait for the next question, I have another one loaded up for me, which is any recommendations that you have for getting a job right now in this insane economy. Any recommendations for, and I'm sure that they're going to be industry specific, so you can give more industry specific ones if they occur to you. Ways to really stand out, to be noticed, all that. What recommendations would you give this group?
Sorry, go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say that I know people talk a lot about like networking and sort of like working your way into the job market that way. For me, what really worked really effectively was leveraging a connection that I had previously. So people will tell you like apply to like as many jobs as you can that like fit like whatever you want to do, and I did that. And I had a whole lot of interviews, and the one that really worked out was an interview with somebody who, the person who was interviewing me had done the same study abroad program that I had done like 2 years maybe earlier, and like by being able to like make that connection, like really like leverage that and work that and say like, hey, that's really awesome, like that really worked really well for me, even in the time where networking and like going to people that I already had connections with wasn't working as well. So sort of a little bit of a twist, but like networking is obviously still really, really valuable, and I advise you all to use like not only your professors and your older network, but also your peer network, because you'd be surprised at what your peers can do for you.
I was just gonna say also that like don't be afraid for your job to be temporary. Like you don't need to land your dream job right out of college. Like it'd be great if you did, but also like you can do your first job as like a way to figure out what you want from a job and like what you want from your life, as Caitlin was saying earlier. And think about the steps that you want to take to get there. So like for me, like the reason that I'm doing City Year next year is like, hey, I wanted to, and it was a great opportunity for me. But also, I am not exactly sure what I want to do as like my big kid job in the future. And so City Year will not only give me different tools that I can use to then reach that point, but it will help me figure it out so that I can like figure out what I want to do for grad school or something. And then it will help me get money so I don't go super into debt when I go to grad school. So it's like, it's not the be all and end all for me, but it is a stepping stone to get where I want to be. And I think that so often we focus on like, oh my God, I graduated and now I have to like get this amazing job because blah. But I think that it's okay to acknowledge and to search for things that you know will be temporary, but will just encourage your growth.
I think one thing that a friend of mine who went to Michigan also once said to me that connected to me was that especially creative types really thrive by maintaining and maintaining connections to institutions and organizations. University of Michigan is an institution and an organization, but for me, that ended up being Blue Lake Fine Arts Camp, which is a place that I had gone to for summer camp for years and years. But it wasn't something that I considered. I didn't consider working there until the position sort of fell into my lap. But I mean, looking back at the story of my life, that was an organization that had a huge impact on me. And when you're starting with an organization where you have at least one credential, even if that credential is, I used to go there, or I did that, or I engaged in that, you're already setting yourself apart from other applicants. If they say, well, you did our program, or you know us in this way, we know you a little bit, whereas the rest of these resumes in the pile are from strangers, it can really set you apart to be an alum of an organization or to have any kind of previous experience. And that is kind of like networking, but it's sort of like thinking about networking through institutions rather than through person to person. And that ended up changing my life.
Yeah, I think this is a really loaded question, but I could go on and on about this. I really love what everyone has said so far. To Mark's point, I think, yeah, networking seems like the obvious answer, but if you don't have any options, I mean, I think it's great to put yourself out there. And if you're the type of person that you're not used to it, or you're not used to kind of like cold calling, I think it's really good to just like practice that and get used to it, because I think that you're probably going to have to do it again down the line. And it's just a really good practice. But I would say, kind of like what Mark was saying, network, but also have a purpose. So, I mean, do your research, like get to know the person that you want to network with, like find out what their interests are if you can, or anything about them that you can really have a connection with during the conversation and it being meaningful, where they step away and they're like, okay, this person clearly like did everything they could to make our conversation meaningful. Like they didn't waste my time, and they, maybe had questions about specific things that I'm doing, kind of tying back to that whole like people like talking about themselves thing. I mean, it all comes into play, I think, honestly, when you have these types of conversations. I also think, Michigan, if Michigan hasn't given you anything, it's the alumni connection. That is so strong. And it's honestly like, it's a blessing. And I think if you just are upfront and you're like, oh yeah, like I graduated from Michigan, like chances are people will at least give you a conversation just because you went to Michigan and we're a cult. But I love it. And it's so helpful. And then I would also say, have patience with yourself, and time to time again, like give yourself a pat on the back, because it's hard reaching out to random people you don't know, and it can be frustrating when like no one responds, but it's kind of like all part of the experience, and you get better as time goes on. You kind of like learn, oh, maybe I shouldn't have phrased that email that way, maybe next time I should lead with this. It's all a learning experience. And it's okay. I think you have to really kind of step back and be like, wow, I did that. I reached out to 20 people. Like, that's good enough for today. And, just be patient, because, like what Maria said, I don't know what I'm doing. This is not, don't be fooled. This is not my dream job. This is just a way for me to learn something that I didn't learn in school, and I'm learning it in the workforce. But it's okay to reinvent yourself. It's okay for things to be short term. But, you know, as long as you are checking in with yourself and you're saying, like, you know, is what I'm doing at this point in time, have I learned everything I need to know? Is it time to do something new? Or, you know, is there more that I can get out of it? You know, having that dialogue with yourself and kind of asking yourself, is this what I want to be doing? Am I happy? All those questions that will help guide you. And then I think being a part of the RC, just with being a creative type and just, you know, being very I guess not so linear, kind of like the picture that was shown in the beginning. If you find yourself in a position where you're like, I don't really like what I'm doing, you have so many tools at your disposal to make that pivot. So I mean, that was a lot, but I think that's really helpful, hopefully.
This is great. Any other questions in the audience? I'm seeing a lot of comments in this chat, which is really helpful. There's been several really good comments. Be nice to everyone. Molly says you never know how they might end up being able to help you in the future. Use that Michigan connection. We've heard that several times. Let's see. My cat is clearly very talkative about this. I really love what Jennifer says about having been on the front line, and then now she's in a position where she's evaluating that kind of work. And so that was a really wonderful way to show that they really know the work from that side of things. And Jeanette, I love that comment. Trying so hard to hire people, but they have to have a cover letter without typos and weird formatting. It's true. It's easy to fall. It's easy to miss those. Yeah, and Jeanette. The cat's name, Tina, is Mercury. That's Mercury, who's never ever quiet. Other questions for this wonderful, esteemed panel? I really appreciate the panel's willingness to answer all these questions. It's been really fun hearing your answers. Other questions for this panel, y'all? And I also open that up to alums in the call. Questions for this panel. Questions you want to ask these couple students that are in the hot seat. Feel free to unmute. Crickets. Okay. Panelists, while we wait, anything else that you didn't get a chance to say yet that you wanted to, that was a thread from an earlier question? One thing that was kind of juicy in the chat was the difference between friendship and mentorship, or even a boss manager and mentorship. And that question didn't explicitly get answered by the panel, but we had some good answers in the chat that I thought were really worth it. Hopefully everybody's reading those when they get a chance.
I don't have anything of use to add, honestly. But my friend Nicole has a mantra that I liked, and she said it constantly while she was applying for this job, and then she got the job. And the mantra is, I am the solution to their problems. And she just repeated it over and over and over again. And I think it's like a little lucky mantra.
Well, delusion of grandeur there now. So I am the solution, like as in like I'm the right person for the job. Is that in that context? Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, it's like whenever a company or an organization or whatever is like hiring someone, it's because like at some level they have a problem, whether it's like they need an extra person or they want a diverse perspective or they blah, 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 blah. Like there is something that is not perfect for them to want to hire a person. And so you are the solution to that problem.
This question just came to me in the chat. What are some things that mentees can offer mentors? I'd love to hear both mentors and mentees answer that question. What are some things that mentees can offer mentors?
I think energy and like a fresh perspective. Like I've loved speaking with during the mentorship program, because I don't know, there's just all this like energy, and I don't know. Yeah, it's been great to be able to connect with someone, and like, I don't know. Yeah. I'm trying not to put her on the spot right now, so I regret talking.
It's okay. it's cat's out of the bag, guys. Newts is my mentor. Yeah, no, I guess like it is so nice just talking to someone that is like removed from my workplace. Like I can say what I want to say. He doesn't know the people. Like it's okay. It's a free, safe space. And I would say also we don't necessarily always talk about like work professional things. Sometimes it's more of like mental health or like what are things that like you are interested in. It's kind of like a space where you don't necessarily always have to be like these are my work goals and like this is what I'm doing. And don't get me wrong, that is fine too if you need that, but I think it's just I think maybe it's also a reflective process for the mentors to be like to see someone go through maybe a pseudo similar path but they have a different take on it and maybe it gives them a spark of creativity to maybe explore things that they put on pause or they want to come back to and now they can like try to put a new spin on it because they've talked to someone younger and then I think also we always kind of just like talk about things that give us comfort and joy, whether that be like, you know, Unutz really likes going to museums, and I really like traveling. And I think talking about stuff like that reminds us that we should do those things more often. And it kind of just adds a more human touch to it, despite this whole pandemic situation where we can't actually be around each other. But yeah, it's a nice little like mental health break and check in.
I think one thing that I enjoy through the kind of mentoring that I also do through working with people who are in their early and mid 20s is that I always say that I just get to siphon off a little bit of their enthusiasm. It's really exciting to work with folks who are at a little bit of an earlier stage in their career, who are, you know, really invested in demonstrating their enthusiasm to you. It can make you remember why you do what you do. I always enjoy that. But I agree with what Lena is saying, is that it's also a chance, being a mentor, to ask yourself these bigger questions like, how did I get here? You know, why am I pursuing the thing I'm pursuing? It's not something that a lot of us, or all of us, I'll say, do on a regular basis, just sort of check in with these big life questions. And when someone's asking you that directly and you have that force in your life, it can be powerful for mentors too.
We're getting into our last few minutes, but I just wanted to put a question in there that occurs to me, which is, Caitlin, you brought up like seeking mentorship of women earlier, and I was thinking about seeking mentorship of people with whom we have an affinity that's not going to be, especially if we're entering into a field where we are a minority or any of those kinds of things. I'm curious if anybody wants to comment on the quality or the benefits of seeking a mentor with whom you have an identity and an affinity with that's not otherwise in the big pool, and how that has been different for you from a mentor that isn't like you in some way.
I guess this is not particular. This is kind of like tangential to like this specific kind of program through the RC. But for me, you know, growing up, I didn't necessarily see like AAPIs or Asian Pacific Islander Americans, you know, in places or in fields that um, other kind of groups were in and you know that's kind of what made me want to minor in it because the faculty at Michigan in the American Culture Department for AAPI studies are all AAPIs and I think that was so empowering for me to see those people like very successful like top of their program scholars do that work and be like wow like people like me can do those things and through that, I really found mentorship with one of my professors. And I always tell her this all the time, you know, you're more than just my professor, you're my mentor, you're my friend, my role model, because like to see that someone like her, someone like me can achieve the things that she has and have so much impact is so meaningful. But to think that it took, I met her when I was like 20. So to think it took 20 years to find this person I mean, I went all through my teenage years and even like my young child years not seeing that type of figure. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like, of course you want to like find your ideal role model and mentor, but sometimes it takes a little time. But I think when you find that person, it really gives so much more meaning, and you kind of know by then how you want to utilize that relationship. And then just kind of like a thing that I totally forgot to mention is, besides the work that I do for Goldman Sachs, I actually do work on the Stop AAPI Hate research team. So that's kind of like a aside. But
Also, just to like add on to that real quick, I think for me it's been really, really nice going through this program. My mentor like is really doing a lot of the things, or like has done and is continuing to do a lot of the things I really want to do. And she also has different identities than me. And being able to have like several people who serve as mentors to me in different capacities has been really, really empowering to me. Just something that I've been thinking about like through this conversation is that like um the reason it took me so long to seek out mentorship is because like I always thought I had my bases covered, like because like I'm lucky in that my parents were always really supportive of me and like really willing to talk about those things. However, they just like they are their own people and they know me too well. They weren't always giving me advice that was useful. They weren't always giving me a new perspective. And being able to find people um who are in the field I actually want to go into and like legitimately did the things that like I'm interested in, like that's where I have gotten the advice that's been useful to me and not just like kind of wishy-washy.
Okay, well, we are at 6 o'clock. We're gonna close up this, and now my dog's in the picture. We're gonna close up the panel. I really want to thank these wonderful panelists for being in the hot seats and taking these questions, especially the loose cannon questions from the hip.